A lot of times we look at rejection like it's this big, ugly wall put in front of us, something that says, you're not good enough, you don't belong here, try again later. And naturally, our first instinct is to shrink back. We feel hurt, angry, confused. But I want to challenge that reaction tonight. I want to flip that whole mindset on its head. Because what if rejection isn't a wall, but a mirror? Carl Jung talked about this thing called the shadow. Now, the shadow is not some mystical boogeyman hiding in the dark. It's a real part of your psychology. It's the pieces of yourself you don't want to look at. It's the envy, the fear, the insecurity, the pride. All those traits you try to bury so deep that even you forget they're there. But the thing is, they don't just disappear. They don't dissolve just because you ignore them. They wait. And sometimes they show up at the exact moment someone says no. Rejection, in many ways, is the world reflecting back to you the parts of yourself you haven't accepted yet. That's what makes it so painful. Not the no itself, but what it triggers in you. That job you didn't get, that relationship that didn't work out, that opportunity that passed you by. What stings isn't just the missed chance, it's what it says about you. Or more accurately, what you think it says. But here's the truth. Rejection doesn't say anything about you. It reveals something to you. You've got to be brave enough to look at that mirror and ask, what am I seeing in this moment that I've been trying not to see? Maybe you're realizing you've built your whole sense of worth around external validation. Maybe you're seeing how quickly you give your power away when someone doesn't approve of you. Maybe you're uncovering just how deeply you crave to be accepted. Because somewhere along the way, you started believing you're not enough without someone else's yes. That's powerful information. That's data. And if you're wise enough to look at it, not turn from it, not bury it, you can grow from it. You can start integrating what Jung called the shadow, not to be ashamed of it, but to own it. To understand that it's part of your story. Because listen, the people who truly become strong, the ones who become unshakable, they don't become that way by being loved all the time. They don't get there because everything came easy. They get there because they looked in the mirror and rejection gave them, and instead of turning away, they leaned in. They studied what they saw, they faced the flaws, the disappointments, the self-doubt, and they asked themselves, what can I do with this? Now let me tell you something that might surprise you. When you make peace with rejection, when you start to see it not as a verdict, but as a message, it stops having power over you. You stop chasing approval like your life depends on it. You start showing up with truth instead of performance. You start moving from authenticity, not desperation. That's where real confidence comes from, not the kind that struts or shouts or shows off. I'm talking about the quiet kind, the kind that stands tall even when nobody claps, the kind that says, I know who I am, and a no won't shake that. See, if someone turns you down, that doesn't define you. That's not the end of the road. Sometimes it's the start of a deeper one that leads you back to yourself, one that demands you ask hard questions. That's how you grow. That's how you build character. That's how you stop breaking every time life doesn't hand you what you thought you wanted. And look, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's worth it. Because on the other side of that mirror is not just truth. It's strength. The kind of strength that can't be faked. The kind that comes from walking through rejection and still choosing to rise. So the next time rejection knocks, don't run. Don't shrink. Don't go looking for quick comfort or empty distractions. Sit with it. Listen. Learn. Because that mirror, it might sting at first, but it just might be showing you exactly what you need to become who you were always meant to be. Let the mirror teach you. You ever notice how sometimes the more you chase something, the more it runs away from you? Like the harder you try to impress someone, the less impressed they seem. The more desperate you are to be accepted, the more likely it is you'll be rejected. That's not bad luck. That's human nature. People are drawn to strength, to calm, to presence. And when we lead with neediness, with anxiety, with fear, we repel the very things we think we want. But that's where reverse psychology comes in. Not in some slick, manipulative way, but in how we relate to ourselves. How we flip the script internally when rejection shows up. Because here's the truth. Sometimes the best way to deal with rejection is to stop chasing acceptance. When someone says no to you, your first instinct might be to push harder, to prove yourself, to show them they made a mistake. But what if you didn't? What if, instead of reacting with panic, you responded with peace? What if you leaned back instead of leaning in? You'd be surprised what happens. You'd be surprised how much power is in doing less, not more. People expect a reaction. That's part of the psychological game. Rejection is a test. Not always intentionally, but on some level, it's measuring your center. Are you rooted in who you are? Or are you at the mercy of every opinion, every yes or no that comes your way? Carl Jung taught that real power lies not in how you control others, but in how you master yourself. Reverse psychology, when it's done right, isn't about tricking someone else. It's about removing your own dependence on the outcome. That's what makes you magnetic. That's what flips the energy. Let me break it down for you. You go into a job interview. You want that job bad. You start talking fast, over-explaining, smiling too hard, nodding too much. You think you're selling yourself, but what you're really doing is giving off desperation. That's a repellent energy. People can feel it. Now flip that. Same interview, same desire, but you walk in grounded, calm, clear about what you offer, but not attached to whether or not they see it. You're not there to convince them. They either recognize your value or they don't. That's power. That's reverse psychology in its realist form, because you're not chasing, you're choosing. And that same energy applies to relationships too. You ever notice how attractive someone seems when they're not trying too hard, when they're just being themselves? That's because they're not wrapped up in what you think of them. They've let go of that need, and that's what draws you in. Now apply that to yourself. When someone rejects you, don't start bending yourself into shapes to win them over. Don't start second-guessing everything about who you are. Stand firm. Let them walk away if they want to. You don't need to become smaller to fit into someone else's version of acceptance. That doesn't mean you become cold or arrogant. It means you stay rooted. You stay true. You stop performing and start being. That's where reverse psychology becomes a lifestyle, not something you do to others, but something you do within yourself. You flip your internal script. Instead of "please see me," you say, "I already see myself." And if they don't see it, that's their blindness, not your failure. Now, some people might call that detachment, but it's not. It's presence. It's being fully here, fully alive, but not letting your worth rise and fall with someone else's reaction. That's how you stop being shaken by rejection. That's how you stop handing your power over every time someone closes a door in your face. You gotta remember, when you're calm in the face of rejection, when you don't flinch or scramble or beg, you send a message, not just to the world, but to yourself. You say, "I know what I bring. I don't have to chase." And in doing that, you turn rejection into attraction. You flip the dynamic. You become the one choosing, not just waiting to be chosen. So the next time life tells you no, don't panic. Don't beg. Don't over-explain. Just breathe. Let it come. Let it go. You're not here to chase what's not yours. You're here to attract what is. Hold your ground. You know, everybody wants strength. Everybody wants power, but very few people are willing to go through the kind of pain that builds it. We all want to shine, but we don't want to sit in the shadows that shape us. Let me tell you something, though. If you're serious about becoming who you're meant to be, then you can't run from rejection. You can't numb it, you can't skip over it, and you sure can't fake your way through it. You've got to face it, feel it, and transform it. That's the real work. Carl Jung said, "What you resist persists." That means the more you try to avoid something, the more power it actually holds over you. That sting of rejection you keep trying to ignore, the hurt you keep burying under pride, ambition, or distractions, it's not going away. It's just waiting in the dark, showing up every time something reminds you of that moment you didn't feel wanted, respected, or seen. You want to know why rejection cuts so deep? Because it doesn't just touch the surface. It hits your identity. It challenges the story you've been telling yourself about who you are and what you're worth. And if you're not careful, if you don't process that pain, it turns into bitterness. It turns into self-doubt. It turns into resentment toward the world and sometimes toward yourself. That's why you've got to integrate it. You've got to use it. That's what Jung meant when he talked about wholeness. Not just living in your strengths, but being honest about your wounds. Being brave enough to sit in your pain. Not to suffer in it, but to grow from it. So how do you do that? You stop pretending you're not hurt. You stop acting like rejection didn't matter when it did. You stop hiding behind anger or pride or indifference, and you say, "Yeah, that cut me, but I'm going to learn from it." You write it down. You speak it out. You get clear on what it triggered in you. Maybe it poked at a childhood fear of not being good enough. Maybe it reminded you of a time when your voice was ignored. That's not weakness. That's self-awareness. And self-awareness is where power starts. You can't alchemize what you won't acknowledge. Pain doesn't transform by accident. It transforms when you bring it into the light, when you examine it with honesty, when you turn toward it instead of away from it. That's how it becomes wisdom. That's how it becomes fuel. Think about the strongest people you know. They didn't get that strength from smooth roads and easy applause. No, they got it from rejection, from failure, from heartbreak. They didn't escape those things. They went through them. And somewhere in that process, they decided, "This isn't going to break me. It's going to make me." When you integrate your pain, when you own your past, when you stop letting rejection define your identity, that's when you become unstoppable, because you're no longer afraid of the no. You're no longer desperate for the yes. You've taken the hit, and you're still standing. That's the kind of strength people can feel in a room before you even open your mouth. But hear me, this isn't about becoming cold. It's not about building walls. It's about becoming real. When you process your rejection, when you let it teach you instead of torment you, you become more authentic. You stop hiding. You stop trying to impress. You stop living from fear, and you start walking in purpose. Because now you're not just running from pain, you've turned it into purpose. You want to know what's on the other side of rejection? Clarity, confidence, peace. But only if you go through it. Only if you're willing to sit in the fire long enough to let it change you. Not destroy you, refine you. So the next time you get turned away, left out, shut down, don't just brush it off. Don't just move on without reflection. Ask yourself, what is this pain trying to teach me? What part of me is being invited to grow? That's how you stop rejection from becoming a prison. That's how you turn it into a path. Let the pain teach you. You ever been chasing something so hard, so sure it was yours, and suddenly the door just slams shut? That job you thought was perfect, that relationship you swore was meant to be, that dream you put everything into, gone, rejected, and you're left there wondering, why? You question your worth, your judgment, maybe even your future. But let me tell you something I've learned. Rejection is not always a detour, it's a redirection. Cecil thought, I've learned always a detour. It's a redirect. It's life, it's spirit, it's the deeper part of you, what Carl Jung called the self, guiding you toward something greater than you could see in the moment. See, Jung believed we're all living out something bigger than our conscious plans. He talked about archetypes, universal roles and patterns that live inside us, the hero, the teacher, the seeker, the creator. And whether we know it or not, our life keeps moving us toward the one we're here to live out. But sometimes we're stuck in the wrong chapter. We're holding on to roles that don't fit us anymore. We're clinging to things we've outgrown or paths that feel safe, even though they're not aligned. And that's when rejection steps in. Because rejection, as painful as it is, can actually be your calling waking you up. It's that shake to your ego that says, you're not supposed to be here, you're supposed to be there. But we don't see that right away. No, first we feel the sting. We get angry, we feel abandoned, we tell ourselves the story that we failed. But what if we've got it backwards? What if the no wasn't the end of the road, it was the sign that you've outgrown the map? You might be praying for clarity, for purpose, for direction, and then you get rejected and you think that's the opposite of the answer you wanted. But maybe it is the answer. Maybe the rejection is the redirection that opens up something you never even considered. Something that pulls from a deeper part of you. Something closer to your destiny. I remember hearing stories about people who missed out on a promotion, only to start the business that changed their whole life. People who got turned down by someone they thought they'd marry, only to meet the person who saw them fully, loved them deeply, chose them completely. You think that no was the loss, but it was a step toward alignment, toward wholeness, toward the version of you you've been called to become. And I'm not saying it's easy. I know it's hard. When rejection shows up, it doesn't come with a gentle explanation. It doesn't say, hey, I'm just here to redirect you toward your higher path. No, it shows up raw, unannounced. It knocks the wind out of you. And in that moment, it takes faith to believe that life still knows what it's doing. But that's what purpose requires. Faith. Faith that even in the no, you're being led, that there's a deeper wisdom at play. And Jung understood this. He knew that the path to becoming your full self isn't always smooth. It's full of these sacred interruptions, painful but powerful moments where life says, this isn't it, keep going. Now here's what makes the difference. Your response. Do you let the rejection define you, or do you let it refine you? Do you shrink back, or do you look around and ask, what now? Where to next? Because sometimes your true path doesn't start until you lose what you thought you couldn't live without. And in that empty space, something new begins. Something more honest, more aligned, more you. There's no shame in being rejected. The shame is in staying stuck in something that no longer fits, in refusing to let go of something that was never meant to carry you where you're going. You don't have to understand the whole plan to trust that one door closing might be the exact force pushing you through the right one. So next time you hear that no, don't collapse. Don't curse the timing. Don't assume you're being punished. Instead, ask yourself, what is life trying to show me right now? What role am I being called to grow into? Because when you stop resisting and start listening, rejection becomes revelation. You know, most people don't realize just how much of their life is being driven by the need for approval. We walk around thinking we're making choices from freedom, from strength, but really we're chasing applause, chasing a nod, a like, a you're good enough. And we don't even know we're doing it. It's so subtle, so woven into the way we talk, walk, dress, work, it becomes invisible. But rejection? Rejection exposes it. It pulls the curtain back. It forces us to ask a question we don't often stop to ask. Who am I without their approval? That's the kind of question that shakes you. Carl Jung said, "We're not just a bunch of surface-level personalities. We're made up of layers. There's the ego, the part of us that wants to be seen, to be liked, to be respected. And then there's the self, that deeper part of us, that just is. The self doesn't need applause, it doesn't perform, it just lives in truth." But most of us, we're stuck in the ego, and the ego, man. The ego needs, it's hungry, it feeds on attention, validation, recognition. And when rejection comes, that ego gets hit hard. It screams, "I'm not enough. I'm not valuable without their yes." But that's a lie. That's the illusion. You were whole before the applause. You were worthy before anyone said your name. And if you're going to live in your real power, you've got to let go of that illusion. You've got to let rejection teach you to detach your value from other people's reactions. Because if you keep depending on their yes to believe in yourself, you'll always be their prisoner. Think about that. How many times have you doubted yourself just because someone else didn't see you? How many times have you changed your direction, your energy, your light, just to get a little approval? It's exhausting. And it's not real living. That's survival mode. That's ego trying to protect itself. But the self knows you don't need to be chosen to be enough. You don't need to be validated to walk tall. You don't need to be liked to live in purpose. See, when rejection comes, and it will come, you've got two choices. You can collapse into your ego, or you can rise into yourself. You can chase, beg, overthink, blame, or you can pause, breathe, and ask, why did this shake me so much? That's where your work begins, not on changing yourself to get accepted, but on stripping away what was never you in the first place. Because when you stop depending on approval, you start depending on truth. You stop molding yourself into what they want and start becoming who you really are. That's where freedom is. That's where peace is. That's where your real voice comes from. And once you touch that, once you live from that place, rejection loses its power over you. You see, the people who truly walk in their strength, they don't just have confidence. They have clarity. They know who they are. They know where they stand. They don't move just to be liked. They move because they're led. And that clarity, that's what scares people. Because when you're no longer controlled by whether or not somebody claps for you, you become untouchable. Not cold, not arrogant, whole. That's what Jung was pointing to all along. Integration, wholeness, getting beyond the mask, the role, the performance, and into the real you. And rejection, as painful as it is, becomes a gift. A gift that invites you to break your addiction to approval and come back home to yourself. So let them say no. Let the door close. Let the silence hang in the air. If it shakes you, let it shake you. But don't let it define you. Let it reveal where your ego still has its grip. Then let it go. Because every time you free yourself from needing their yes, you step closer to living in yours. Let go of the illusion. You know what's wild? The very thing we're most afraid of, the thing we run from, hide from, fight against, is often the exact thing trying to show us our real strength. Rejection doesn't just sting. It doesn't just bruise your pride. It pulls something up from deep inside you, something raw, something uncomfortable. But if you're paying attention, if you're brave enough to sit with it, to look at it, you'll start to see what Carl Jung was trying to tell us all along. The parts of yourself you reject, the parts you try to bury, those are the same parts that hold your power. We all have a shadow, Jung wasn't talking about something evil or spooky. He meant the parts of ourselves that we push down, that we're ashamed of or afraid of. The parts we were told were too much or not enough. That fear of being unwanted, shadow. That anger that bubbles up when someone overlooks you, shadow. That deep insecurity you don't talk about, but feel in your chest when you get turned away, is shadow. And rejection brings all of that to the surface. That's why it hurts so much. Not because of the no on the outside, but because of what it echoes on the inside. But here's where the shift happens. Most people try to silence the shadow. They numb it, deny it, hide it behind smiles, success, and busyness. But that doesn't make it go away. All that does is give it more control from the background. The real power, the real transformation, that comes when you face it, when you look rejection in the eye and say, "What are you trying to show me?" Because once you do that, once you start facing those hidden parts of yourself, you begin the process of turning shadow into strength. You stop being a prisoner to your own fear. You stop overreacting every time someone tells you you're not good enough. You stop living in a loop of proving, pleasing, performing. Instead, you start reclaiming your power. You start seeing that all those parts of you, your anger, your pain, your hunger, your heartbreak, they're not weaknesses. They're fuel. They're energy. They're fire. And fire, when it's harnessed, creates light. It creates movement. It forges something new. You can't transform what you won't face. You can't grow from rejection if you pretend it doesn't hurt. And you can't access your full potential if you're only willing to bring your polished side to the table. Growth lives in the grit. Transformation lives in the tension. And sometimes the most painful no is what unlocks the most powerful yes you've ever had. The one that comes from you. Think about it. The person who's never been rejected, never been humbled, never had to wrestle with failure. They might look confident on the outside, but it's not rooted, it's not deep. But someone who's walked through it, who's been turned down, looked past, knocked down, and got back up with their souls still intact, that's somebody who's dangerous in the best way. Because they've met their shadow and they didn't run. They owned it. They worked with it. They turned it into a tool. That's what rejection can do if you let it. It can reveal your survival instincts. It can show you what you really believe about yourself. And more than anything, it can unlock a new level of self-respect. Not the kind that needs to be earned through applause, but the kind that's forged in silence, in solitude, in those quiet moments after the door closes and you say, "I'm still here." So when you feel that sting, when the rejection comes and you feel the heat rise in your chest, that voice in your head telling you you're not enough, pause, listen. Don't run. Don't numb it with distractions or hide it under fake smiles. Sit with it. Learn from it. Because that's your shadow speaking. And that shadow? That's not your enemy. That's your teacher. That's your untapped strength, waiting for you to stop being afraid of it. The moment you stop running from the rejection is the moment you start rising from it, because you're not broken. You're not unworthy. You're not weak. You're being refined. You're being revealed. And the more of yourself you're willing to face, the more of your true power you'll be able to claim. Face the shadow. So here's your challenge. The next time you get rejected, don't run from it. Don't numb it. Don't explain it away. Sit with it. Study it. Let it show you the parts of yourself you've been afraid to face. And then use it. Use that pain as power. Use that silence as space to grow. Because if you can do that, if you can let rejection refine you instead of define you, there's nothing in this world that can stop you from becoming who you're meant to be. Start now. Start with the last no you heard and turn it into your greatest breakthrough. Thank you.